Hello, boys and girls. Our book of the day today is called Butterfly Magic, written by Jill Eggleton and illustrated by Helen Bacon. So Jill Eggleton is our author. She wrote all of our words. And Helen Bacon is our illustrator. She drew all of the pictures in this book. Butterfly Magic. Beatrix Bee was the butterfly woman of Boogletown. Hundreds of butterflies danced in her garden and in and out of her house. Beatrix Bee loved butterflies. "Butterflies make me happy," she said. She looks very bright and colorful, doesn't she? Mr. Grizzle lived in Boogletown too, right on the very same street as Beatrix Bee. But Mr. Grizzle was not happy like Beatrix Bee. Mr. Grizzle was grumpy with everything and everyone. Does he look very colorful? No, his house kind of looks sad and very gray. When a dog went woof woof at Mr. Grizzle's gate just to say hello, out came Mr. Grizzle, thump, 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 scowling and growling and grump, grump, grumping. "Stop barking," he shouted. When the birds in the trees sang their morning songs, out thumped Mr. Grizzle, thump, 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 scowling and growling and grump, grump, grumping. "Stop that singing," he shouted. And there he is, looking all mean and angry. Mr. Grizzle growled and grumped at snails for sliding and worms for wiggling, and he growled and grumped at spiders for spinning a web on his fence. Mr. Grizzle growled and grumped at the sun. "Go away," he shouted. "You are too hot." He growled and grumbled and shouted at the moon. "You are too small. You shouldn't even be in the sky at all." He's a very grumpy man, isn't he? And when it rained, out thumped Mr. Grizzle, thump, 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 scowling and growling and grump, grump, grumping. He shouted at the sky, "Stop that crying." Mr. Grizzle was grumpy with all the people on the street. When someone said, "Hello, Mr. Grizzle," he scowled. Scowled means to make an angry face. When someone said, "How are you today, Mr. Grizzle?" he growled. "Urgh." "Mr. Grizzle needs butterflies," said Beatrix Bee. Do you think butterflies will cheer him up? Miss Beatrix Bee seems to think so. So Beatrix Bee got a big box, and she filled it up with butterflies, beautiful butterflies. She waited for Mr. Grizzle's house. When Mr. Grizzle came out, thump, 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 scowling and growling and grump, grump, grumping, Beatrix Bee let the butterflies go. The butterflies danced around Mr. Grizzle. They tickled his tummy, they tickled his toes, they tickled his ears, and they tickled his nose. Mr. Grizzle wiggled. Mr. Grizzle jiggled. Mr. Grizzle giggled and giggled and giggled. Mr. Grizzle had never giggled before. It felt good. It felt wonderful. Beatrix Bee let the butterflies stay with Mr. Grizzle. And now, whenever Mr. Grizzle looks scowly and growly, the butterflies tickle his tummy and tickle his toes and tickle his ears and tickle his nose. And Mr. Grizzle giggles and giggles and giggles. He looks happy now, doesn't he? And that is the end of our butterfly magic story. So in the end, butterflies did help Mr. Grizzle to become less grumpy.